Hey, holla at your boy. That might be what Fitzgerald is saying to other teams because holla might be on the hot seat when it comes to trade discussions. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils are at Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. The Panthers took care of business. They eliminated the Hurricanes in 5, and now they head to their third straight Stanley Cup final. Congratulations to former Devils players Vitek Vanacek, Jesper Boquist, AJ Greer, Tomas Nosek, Dmitry Kulikov. I said in a recent episode, there is no reason why you should be rooting for the Hurricanes. I don't care about that stupid agenda saying that the Devils lost to the eventual Eastern Conference champions. That's why they were knocked out in the first round. I said, no. Anybody but the Hurricanes. Just a spirit of competition, not trying to start anything. But congratulations to Paul Maurice and company. They got a dynasty forming in Sunrise if they haven't done so already. And they very well could win the Stanley Cup for the second year in a row, going back to back. Based on how the Dallas and Edmonton series is going, I think we're going to get a rematch from last year's Stanley Cup final. Whoever you root for in the final, I don't really care. But like I said, anybody but Hurricanes. The Panthers are pretty much the blueprint and foundation for any NHL team. Devils are no exception. I talked about it on this show. They got a lot of talent up and down their lineup. They have a lot of key contributors. I think that's one of their biggest strengths. They have so much talent to work with. Speaking of depth, let's talk about Erik Haula for today's episode. So what's on the agenda? In the first segment, we will reflect on Haula's 2024-2025 season from a statistical standpoint. Then in the second segment, we will actually hear from Erik Haula from exit interviews. He talked about some of these struggles he endured throughout the course of the season. It wasn't just the ankle injury that he dealt with. He actually was dealing with something before the start of the regular season. And then in the third and final segment, we're going to have a tough conversation when it comes to Haula. He's 34 years of age. This is the final year of his contract. His no-trade clause now converts to a modified no-trade clause. Is it time to part ways with Haula? Is his seat getting a little warm? This year for Haula, he appeared in 69 games. 69 is such a strange number. Keep in mind, he did deal with an ankle injury that kept him sidelined for 1 month. He had 11 goals, 9th on the team, 10 assists, 13th on the team, for a grand total of 21 points, 11th on the team. He had 5 power play points. He was a face-off specialist. He won 378 face-offs, which was second on the team, just behind Hischier. It gave him a face-off win percentage of 52.6%. He had 35 blocks, 12th on the team, and he had 101 hits, 9th on the team. Haula was also given the chance to represent Team Finland during Four Nations. I was there for the games in Boston. One of the reasons why I loved Four Nations was because it gave players like Haula a chance to participate on a big stage when if it was just an all-star game, Haula's not going to be given that chance. Just no way. But Four Nations, he gets to represent his own country. He gets to participate in the festivities. It was a lot of fun for not only just me, but the fans, the players. So I was really glad to see that Haula got to represent the Devils and his country on that sort of stage. Here's what Haula had to tell me during exit interviews when I asked him about his 2024-2025 season. Take a listen.
From a personal standpoint, how would you assess your season, your like in terms of impact and things like that?
Yeah, I think overall a pretty good start to the season, and then I had a really tough stretch, like everyone knows there, production wise. But then it's not always about production. In my role, it's not counted on as much as some other guys. But then on the other side of the puck, defensively, that wasn't really where I was at my best either. So tough stretch, but I'm real happy and proud of how I was able to finish, after trade deadline and, changing positions a little bit and getting kind of sort of a fresh start there. I was able to integrate, different, things into my game that weren't seen in that stretch and overall finish strong and try to play my heart out in playoffs.
When it comes to Haula, he did bring up an interesting point, which is it's not really his job to score goals. That's not his bread and butter. Lindy Ruff talked about it a couple years ago when he was the head coach. Haula's main job is to do faceoffs, get into the dirty areas, work the puck, and try to give the Devils possession. He does that because, like I said, he's a faceoff specialist. He's a dynamic player. Unfortunately, I think it's safe to say he did have his fair share of struggles. He had a lengthy drought in which he didn't contribute anything points-wise. He did finish strong, so I'll give him credit. But it seems like Haula has taken a couple steps backwards compared to his 2022-2023 season. Last year, it was a struggle in general for a lot of players. But I don't think Haula was a player that we pointed to and said, like, oh, man, he's struggling mightily. And he's a big reason why the Devils aren't getting a lot of wins. The Devils had a lot of issues. Haula wasn't really one of them. But this year, it was just noticeable because outside the top six, the Devils weren't getting much contribution. Haula got off to a really good start. He was a point-per-game player. But obviously, he was sort of punching above his weight class. I just expected a little bit more when it came to offensive contribution. And we'll talk about that momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller all day long. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's a perfect grab and go snack for busy days. As a content creator, I am constantly on the go, so I love having a snack by my side. It doesn't matter if I'm in the airport, at my desk, just out and about. Love Wonderful Pistachios. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Okay, Haula spoke on his struggles. He talked about his injury and also something else that I want to take into consideration. Here's what he had to share.
When you get into these things as an athlete where you're kind of in a funk and you just can't find yourself out, sometimes you can dig your way out quicker. Sometimes you just keep going down and it's hard to get out. So I had that injury that was a high ankle sprain that took 5 weeks or so. Kind of still feel it a little bit, and those are can be annoying, but I don't know, just getting moved to the wing and just playing with different guys, just kind of, it was sort of a fresh start, and then I was able to get a lot out of myself after that, and it was 20 plus games finish the season in the playoffs. I think I was a pretty impactful player for the team, and especially losing a guy like Jack, you have to step up your game because how are you gonna replace that? You can't. So, like I said, I'm proud of and happy with how I finished.
And just your first year under Sheldon Keefe, how did you assess that season, your first season with him?
Yeah, I think it was progress. That's probably the word I would use. You start. I missed most of the training camp. I don't know. It was like Sunday. I think we started on Wednesday, but the Sunday before it, I had fever for 8 days. I ended up fainting at my own house. I don't know like what that was. It was kind of scary, kind of crazy. So you put all that work into summer, then you have a fever for 8 days. You lose 10+ pounds, and you feel like garbage, pretty much. I don't know. Then you kind of pick up bits and pieces from there. Like I said, I was still happy with my start, and yeah, with new coaches, it's for him, for me, for every individual, it's you just you want progress. You get to know each other better. And so overall, just happy with how things finished and ended.
Okay, going back to the first segment, I talked about the lengthy drought that Haula endured during the season. Between November 25th and March 9th, Haula didn't contribute a single point. No goals, no assists. He was just out there. Worth mentioning, during that span, he did miss a month of action due to an ankle injury. But it still doesn't change the fact that he played in a decent amount of games during that span, and he didn't contribute anything points-wise. That can't happen. The scoring has to be a little more spread out. What do I mean by that? Well, to Haula's credit, he finished the season strong. From March 9th to April 16th, he had 6 goals, 4 assists for a grand total of 10 points. And he had a plus-minus rating of +6. That's good work. At least he finished the season on a high note. But this goes back to what Tom Fitzgerald said, Sheldon Keefe said, the scoring has to be a little more spread out. You can't just have a good start and a good finish and then in the middle, next to nothing. There has to be a balance there. And I think that's what a lot of players struggled with. As we all know, hockey is a very complex sport. Haula said just simply switching positions really helped him because it gave him a fresh start. I know we don't think of him as a scorer, but that's kind of intriguing that he went that amount of time without contributing a point. And then he got a little snippy with the media in March when he called out a reporter for saying, like, you've been chirping about my goal scoring in the last few months. I'm just like, Haula, rightfully so. I know you're human at the end of the day, and I do want to empathize with them, but you put up zeros for a few months. It's not like you just went on a 1-month slump. You went on a multi-month slump. But here's the thing. I do want to empathize with Haula a little bit because he talked about how before the start of the season, he was really sick. He was battling the flu. He fainted in his own house. He was scared. He didn't know what was going on. Then at one point in the year, he dealt with an ankle injury. And it goes to show you that sometimes we see a different perspective of the athlete that a lot of you don't really see. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy exit interviews because it gives the player a chance to reveal a lot of things that they didn't reveal throughout the course of the season. Because as we all know, hockey players, the NHL, front offices, they're usually tight-lipped when it comes to injuries. But Haula really opened up what he was battling with, and not just from an injury standpoint, but a mental standpoint as well, saying that it was extra frustrating when he couldn't contribute at all. Because I know that's never the goal for a hockey player. I don't think any hockey player wants to be out there just doing cardio, going up and down, up and down. And yes, Haula's still doing faceoffs. Yes, Haula's still racking up the hits. But once again, one of the Achilles heels for the Devils was their depth scoring. And the fact that Haula's points came very early in the season and then very late in the season, that's not really all that efficient. I hope I'm articulating that correctly. So I know everyone is quick to bash on Haula, and just make sure you look at it from a different perspective, because Haula just talked about the mental struggle he had to endure. And I think that is one of the reasons why he did get snippy with the media at some point. So my thing is, Hala, he didn't have a good year. I think even he can attest to that. But he did contribute in different categories. And I'm sure the Devils were glad to get him back from injury, because when he was out, they were struggling in the faceoff department. In fact, I think that's something the Devils have been trying to work on all year long, just trying to be more consistent in the faceoff dot, because they relied heavily on Heischer. They relied heavily on Hala. So just take that into consideration. All right. Before I give my thoughts as to what Tom Fitzgerald should do with Erik Haula, here's what he had to say about the team's overall efforts this season.
If we're being honest here, as a team, as an organization, we just had an average year. Making the playoffs should be, expected for our group, and losing first round in 5 is, it's not what we want. So, I'd call it an average year.
In saying that, what are sort of the things that you hope that this group learned about themselves going through what you're calling an average year, and what it takes maybe?
Yeah, well, it's so fresh still in mind that, there's a lot of reflecting for everyone to do here. First and foremost, we need to get better, as individuals and collectively as a group. If it's personnel or whatnot, that's obviously, those are, Fitzy and their decisions, and I'm sure they're going to do, their best in, putting the best team that they can on the ice for next season. And that's kind of the bottom line is get better as individuals, get better as a group, because, we're not there. And, the goal is always to win the Stanley Cup, and we're just falling short. So that's just the bottom line is we need to get better as a group.
He is right. This team is not an average team. Sheldon Keefe even spoke about it during his respective exit interview. But Haula also mentioned that whatever the front office decides to do, that's out of his control. Haula is in the final year of his 3-year deal. He has a cap hit of $3.15 million. Like I said earlier in the show, his no trade clause now converts to a modified no trade clause. There are 6 teams on that list. Should the Devils trade Erik Haula? He is 34 years of age. And my big question for Haula is, how much further can he be pushed? In other words, has he run his course with the Devils, or is there still a lot more to his game that we just didn't get the chance to see this season? Because we saw what he was able to do during the 2022-2023 season, but that's a couple years removed. And I think the Devils are trying to capitalize on the window that they have right now, which is they want to go further in the playoffs. They don't want to just be a first round exit. They don't want to be a team that makes the playoffs, misses the playoffs, makes the playoffs, misses the playoffs. They need some more consistency. The thing about Haula is that there's not really much you can get one for one, but if he's included in a package deal, that's a different story. Haula has only played on playoff caliber teams throughout his entire career. He's only missed the playoffs twice. The first go round was when he was injured with the Golden Knights. That team still made the playoffs. He just didn't play in it. And then the second time he missed the playoffs was 2024, when the Devils just missed it entirely. First time that's happened in his career where he just misses the playoffs entirely and he's healthy. Just take a note of that. Haula has only played on playoff caliber teams. So I think the interest rate for Haula might be a little higher than you think, because I'm sure GMs take note of that, saying that when Haula is traded away, he's traded to a team that is in playoff contention. So 1-for-1, I don't think you're going to get much for Haula. But then again, I think the Bruins thought they were getting something out of Pavel Zacha, but that's a discussion for another time. But I do think that Haula's seat is getting a little warm, just because he's one of the few players on the Devils roster that doesn't have a no movement clause, doesn't have a full-blown no trade clause. Now he has a modified no trade clause with 6 teams on that list. In my personal opinion, I think Fitzgerald should certainly consider trading Haula, because if you include him in a package deal, that might help you in more ways than one. So I think Haula is a good player. I think he did have a bit of a down year just because he dealt with injury. He talked about the mental battles he was enduring all season, whether it was just struggling to put up points or just trying to come back from a misfortune like an injury. But just given his age, given his contract, given what the Devils are trying to do, and Fitzgerald revealing that the team is going to have a new look come next year, I think Haula's seat is definitely feeling warm. And I think the Devils, it might be in their best interest to search for trade options when it comes to Haula and see what you might get. Honestly, it might be a tough decision for Fitzgerald just because Haula is beloved in the locker room. We heard what Jack had to say about him a couple seasons ago. Anytime I'm in the locker room, I see Haula laughing, cracking jokes, being loud. For anybody from the Hurricanes who are trying to say that Haula is a cancer, he's a problem, that's not true. Yes, he could be a little snippy with the media, but all in all, I think Haula is well liked by his teammates, and he definitely brings a good dynamic to the locker room. I think Kovacevic even said that Haula is one of the biggest personalities among their group. So I think it's safe to assume that Haula is well liked in New Jersey for more ways than one. Silly season is on the rise, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of trade packages make their way on social media. Silly season is my favorite part of the offseason. We're going to have to look at some possible trade scenarios for the Devils. Fitzy wasn't really able to do much during the deadline. Maybe he could do a little bit more during the offseason. We're just going to have to wait and see. But let me know your thoughts. What did you think of Haula's abysmal performance this past season? And do you think it's time for the Devils to move on from him? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.